youth bulge that, if not properly handled, can be a time bomb that can blow this country to pieces.
And as a matter of fact, that's going to be our next topic. So, most appreciated. But yeah, so let's talk about that actually, right? So I've had a couple of people ask me what's happening in Africa, right? What's up with all these riots that seem to be predominantly led by the young? Well, it's not a surprise. In most cases, most people who would engage in demonstrations, most of them would likely be young people, obviously depending on the issue. But when you're talking about a general issue like, let's say, the economy, most of the people who will appear on the streets will be younger. So there's a couple of things to note, right? So first of all, let's put these things a little bit in context. Most of these things happened a few years ago. If you guys can remember, there were a lot of riots in Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia, those countries. And the primary reason why this was happening was because there were a lot of young people who are feeling that the system had let them down. You know, they were dealing with a bad hand, right? Eventually, most of that calmed down. And a couple of presidents were overthrown, as we all know, and this actually happened as well in other Middle Eastern countries. But the primary thing that you need to notice here is the age of the average person in that country, right? In those countries. These countries are a little bit older than sub-Saharan African countries in terms of the average age, right? Depending on who you ask, the average age, depending on what Western institution you ask, we have to take some of these statistics as they give us, right? Depending on who you ask, the average age of the African population is between 16 and 18 years. Now, that's very young. That means Africa is full of just kids running around everywhere. Just compare that to Europe, whose average age is between, again, according to whom you ask, is between 45 and 47 years. So we are very young. We are a very young population. And when the young people within a country, whether they are right or wrong, as long as they feel that things are not right, and usually one of the statistics that will show you that things are not right is if you run some form of survey or poll and it shows that a majority of your young population does not have hope for the future. That means they're not very confident about their future. When the numbers look bad on that, that means you have a problem in your hands. Now, it's very interesting because my former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, actually brought this up. Now, I'm not that much of a fan of Uhuru Kenyatta. It is what it is. And in Kenya, if you go there, he's known as a drunk. But he's also known to have done a whole lot of infrastructural projects. And the vast majority of the country seems to have a positive view on the guy. Now, I'm going to play a video here. It's a short video, but it's something he's saying. And this was said, I think, in October of 2020. Now, if you guys have been following generally what's been happening in Kenya, this will sound really prophetic. But let's hear what he has to say, and then we will continue. Tell me, guys, if you can hear this.
A youth bulge that, if not properly handled, can be a time bomb that can blow this country to pieces. And the handling of that has to be done extremely carefully. Extremely carefully. That is not a problem of this community or that. It affects us all. But how we manage it, we must manage it very carefully.
I mean, generally, what he's saying is something, if you think about it, makes a lot of sense. If you have a lot of, especially unemployed youth, or you have a whole bunch of poor youth, or sometimes you have a whole bunch of youth that are being misled by one party, whether it's a domestic party or whether it's been indoctrinated by a foreign party, doesn't matter. The fact remains you have a whole bunch of young people who make up the vast majority of the country. For example, the country which I'm from and the country where President Kenyatta is from, the vast majority are Gen Zs, obviously, right? It's something, if you think about it, is it's an issue that was waiting to happen. And this is happening all over the African continent. If problems have not begun, they are waiting to begin. And one of the trigger points usually it's either the government trying to pass a bill that's unpopular, like what Kenya just did and almost burnt the whole country down, or elections where somebody, a vast majority of young people support, loses, or they believe that the election was rigged one way or another. So that's what it means. It's a ticking time bomb. And that means you have to handle them with a lot of care to avoid a lot of problems. A lot of problems these are scenes from what was happening in Kenya. And it's something a lot of you I know can relate. But to avoid scenes like this, where just everybody is just fighting each other. And the thing is, you can bring out riot police, and riot police can stop most of the issues. If they cannot, that means you more than likely have to end up using live ammunition. The moment you start using live ammunition, depending on a number, now I don't know what that number is. I don't know when the nation says this number is too high to go back, right? But there's a number you may reach and you can't go back. If you kill hundreds of people and there are videos showing you killing hundreds of people using live ammunition or anything else that takes their lives, you can't go back. You either end up in prison or you have to run out of the country. So this is one of those times where the whole country can be torn apart. Just like the former President Kenyatta was saying, everything can go horribly wrong. It can go okay or it can go horribly wrong. I haven't been following exactly what was happening in Nigeria, but something similar was happening. And what I'd like to talk about today is what can we do to sort of stop these things from happening, right? What can a government do? What can the people do to stop this from happening? In other words, how do we avoid these chaos that threatens to tear our countries apart? Well, they are tried solutions. They are solutions that have worked. They are countries that have done most of the things we're going to talk about and much more to more or less stabilize their youth and avoid violence, right? The first thing I'd like to talk about is the type of leadership, right? You've seen leaders who come to power, and the first thing they do is put up a strong man persona, right? That leader who doesn't take any nonsense, that leader you know, who just is abrasive, right? And sometimes it works. Sometimes it works. But sometimes we forget that one of the reasons why it works is because nothing bad happens that involves a majority of the country. In other words, your presidency may end without you having to deal with huge riots. Now, you can be a tough leader, but you have to do it like, the guy from Russia, Vladimir Putin, right? If you guys have watched him, what he does is actually really smart. I'm not saying that I support the guy, but what he does is very smart. He's very tough on officials, he's very tough on high ranking members of society and elite, but he's very patient and tries to act very kind to the average person. If you want to put up a strong personality, that's what you do. Another good example is the former president of Tanzania, John Pombe Magufuli, right? He was very tough with officials, very tough with people who work in government, but he was very humble when dealing with the average person. And people loved him for that. But so that's one of the things. You have to choose a type of government that fits your people, but most importantly, you have to be careful. You cannot be arrogant if you have a huge youth population. Well, you shouldn't be arrogant, period. But you should not be arrogant if you have a huge youth population. The problem is, if things go bad, what are you going to do? You can't kill them all. You're not going to call the military and say, open fire on them. You're not going to do that for very many reasons. You will go to the International Criminal Court and many other things. And also the fact that if the public catches you physically, you will be in trouble. You will be in trouble. We have seen in the past leaders being lynched by their own people. So you'll be in trouble. Second, within the same point of type of leadership, you also have to make sure you do the best you can to stop your people looking at the government as an adversary. What do I mean by that? There are very many countries in the world where the public feels it's them versus the government. You have to try the best you can to erode that to such a level where you gain as much trust as you can from the public, especially young people. And sometimes that involves being extremely humble, right? I'll give you an example of the same guy, Uhuru Kenyatta, the previous Kenyan president. He used to appear in public all the time and apologize. He would say, "Oh, I'm sorry if I wronged you. Can you forgive me? We need eventually we have to forgive each other, anyways, right?" So he was known for that. Now, to some people that looks weak, but it's not, because what he's doing is, one, he's trying to involve the youth as much as he can within the process. He's informing the youth that he's having difficulty or he didn't do something he was supposed to do. The youth feels involved at that point. Secondly, what he's doing is, by looking as if he's not like as strong as other leaders would be, he creates a connection. He creates a connection with the public. Like, he came out one time, he was talking about corruption. He was saying he's trying to fight corruption and he's having a great difficulty. The truth is, a lot of people know fighting corruption is very difficult. Even the general public is aware of that. Him coming out in public saying that shows that, one, he's honest, and two, he's trying to inform the public. Therefore, you have to try your best to clear that gap between the public and the government. Also, within the same category of type of leadership is getting them involved in various parts of leadership. If you can, just create a whole lot of positions, or let the young people have positions, let them be involved in decision making. That is very, very important. If they feel it's a whole bunch of 60-year-olds and the 60-year-olds are making mistakes, now remember, you can be any sort of leader, right? You can be a woman, you can be a man, you can be old, you can be young. As long as you're delivering, the public, especially the African public, is very forgiving. They'll let you get away with anything as long as you're delivering the basics, right? The other point here is basically to avoid all these problems is to improve the material conditions of people. That goes without saying. And that's the most important point here, right? Jobs, right? So jobs are the first thing. If you have a huge percentage of unemployment, I can't remember the numbers I saw, but if your unemployment exceeds like 10%, you're in trouble. You're in a lot of trouble. That's a ticking time bomb. Things are going to go bad. Things are going to go bad when they do go bad, right? And this is a difficult thing to do, to be quite honest, because you will try and keep the same system of capitalism, but still try and have a jobs program. Those two things somehow can easily go against each other, because most of the rich elites of any country will feel like they're going to lose. And sometimes they do lose when you actually try and improve the material conditions of the public. So you definitely have to fight for the young people to get jobs. And also, you just have to use brains, right? Just use brains. Figure out ways to create jobs. Look at other countries and what they have done. I've told people all the time, there are a lot of examples of good governance and of solutions to problems we have run into. Some of the problems we run into, other countries have already run into them. So look into them, right? If you keep on looking internally the whole time, you keep thinking that most of your problems have no solutions, but they do. And creating jobs abroad is not a solution. It is something we have seen some leaders try and do: go abroad, try and talk to other leaders to have them hire people from our African countries. That is not a solution. One, because we are too many. There are just too many of us, right? You cannot export the whole unemployed population of Africa to other continents. It's not going to work. Secondly, some people forget some of these countries really hate Africans. And, they have their racist past. There's nothing you can do about that, right? And so you don't want your population in these places if you can avoid it. So the best thing is to create jobs domestically. The other thing, obviously, goes without saying, is the cost of housing. If you don't have a place to stay, if it's too expensive, you have problems. You have to find ways of resolving that issue. And again, without going into details, you can go to hundreds and hundreds of examples all over the world of how people resolved this issue, even without spending as much money as people think should be spent. We have observed so many countries do a lot of programs to keep the youth busy. And if you can keep them busy and make them money at the same time, right, you are not going to have problems in a very long time. And examples of that we have seen is China, right? So China, if people don't know, there was a huge program to fight against deserts, right? And fighting deserts is a very, very difficult thing. It's very difficult, and whether you like it or not, it takes a long time. But China decided to use what they had in abundance, which is manpower. And within a whole bunch of years, like within a decade or so, if I'm not wrong, they grew a forest in the desert the size of the country of France. That was done mainly with the participation of the whole country in general, and mostly the youth. And as a matter of fact, if I saw this video where they were talking to people in the streets about this program, people were really excited about it. Everybody wanted to be involved. And that's the other part of it that people don't understand, that not all these young people want to stay in the streets with nothing to do. A lot of them want to be involved. A lot of them want to do something. And if they're doing it for the good of their country, even better, right? Most of these people will meet in these places, in these activities, friendships will be formed. A lot of people will learn of new things that they couldn't do. Some of them may even discover uh, one of the main, let's say, talents they have. Some of these people will discover that they're actually good at something. Remember, there are a lot of people even who reach their 50s who don't know what they're actually good at. And I personally believe that everybody is good at something, right? So these activities may actually bring that out in people, which is a good thing, right? The other thing is, which is a little bit abstract, but it's worth mentioning, is giving them hope, right? Just talking to them. If you're having difficulty doing something, express it. If you don't know what to do, you can actually say it. You can actually say it. Remember, most of these young people in Africa, especially, are very intelligent. They are very smart. These, especially the Generation Z, they're very intelligent. And you don't even need to lie to them because they already learned the truth from the internet even before the television said anything, right? So you can be honest with them, so give them hope. And the moment those people are hopeful, the moment these people sit back and say, you know what, we think our future is bright, you will not have any problem with young people. You will have little problems here and there, drug use here, or a couple of violent things here, but in general, you're not going to have any problems with these people anymore. But there are many other things I haven't mentioned, obviously. This is a very, very broad subject, but this is something I wanted to bring up, and I think it's something important to talk about. Most important because some of you guys have been asking me about this and ask me, hey, what do you think about this? What's going on in Kenya? What's going on in Nigeria? What's going on this and that country? And that's my opinion about this. You guys can tell me what you think. I know you guys, especially from various parts of the continent, have unique problems. So in the comments, you can tell me. And for you guys who are watching through YouTube, please like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. So let's move on to something else. So I had talked about this a few weeks ago